two.
You were saying?
Oh, I was just saying I do have a desk with a treadmill and I love it.
Oh, wow. It works out well for you, huh?
I'm not as committed as I need to be, I will admit, but at my height, I was doing 4 hours a day of walking.
Wow.
I mean, you're walking slow because you're typing at the same time you're walking, but
It counts. It
but you know, I
counts.
was doing 7 miles a day.
Wow. That's great.
Very nice. So Dr. Thompson, when you get yours, can you get two? You could probably get a good discount.
I'll consider it. Because I'll tell you, my wife's not going to fight me over it.
All right, everyone. I'm letting everyone in. We're getting started shortly. But as you're getting on, could you please go on mute?
We're so sorry for your sacrifice, but thank you for your service, Mrs. Moffitt. Thank you.
Happy Tuesday evening, everyone. People are just coming on in here. Give them a few more seconds. Okay. It's so good to see some familiar faces. They're coming back. I love it. I love it. I love it. Just give it a few more moments here. Okay. All right. Every time I get ready to start, it's like 3, 4 people ready to get involved. So I'm just like, so I'm just give them a few more seconds, and then we're gonna count down here and get started. Please mute yourselves as you come on, please. Thank you.
Okay.
30-year-old? No, them jokers up to 43 years old. When you talk about millennials, we are 3 generations behind. The millennials.
All right.
We're the last one real behind. You know the last generation. What's the last?
All right, everyone. Good evening. First things first, I'm Chanel Brandon. I am the Secretary of Healthy Living with a Vision, and we are here in our 3rd week of our 28-day plant-based kickoff. First things first, can you please mute yourselves? I don't want to mute all because I don't want to mute all of our the people that are going to be speaking. So please mute yourselves. Thank you. We are in for a treat tonight. We have had a good 2 weeks, and this is our 3rd week, and we have an amazing guests. Actually, I take that back. So we're going to have Dr. Priya, and Dr. Priya is going to be with us talking about exercising and sleep. You know, we all sometimes have issues with sleeping. I know I do. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm up looking for some Ruffled potato chips, and I might watch a little bit more TV. But here lately, since I've been trying to eat better, I find that my sleep is getting better. So Dr. Priya is going to really get a chance to get in tune to talk to us about that. Then we have another guest, Watch Dominion. We're excited to have them on board. So get ready, get your glass of water with cucumbers, and relax. We're going to have a good time tonight. Everybody excited? Let me see some hands. I love it. We're pumping it up, okay? Virtual style. All right. So before I turn it over to Dr. Thompson, I want to make sure that I let you guys know, again, I'm from Healthy Living with a Vision Foundation. We are sponsoring this wonderful event. And we also want you to check out our website. It's www.healthylivingwithavision.org. And we got some really, really good recordings that are there so that you can look at the previous things that we did over week 1 and week 2. And then if you want to donate, please donate, because we're non-for-profit and we want to keep these going so we can bring it out into the neighborhoods and continue this for everybody to be able to live healthy. All right, so I'm getting ready to turn it over to Dr. Thompson. Let's enjoy. Keep those questions in the chat box and we will go over them a little later. See ya.
Thank you, Chanel. Good evening, wonderful people. My, how time flies. Here we are already at the end of January. I hope you found our first 2 Zoom events as enlightening as I did. But if you happen to have missed them, no worries. You can catch up by accessing my bullet point summaries on fearlessmd21.com or our foundation website, healthylivingwithavision.org. Plus, we've got the first Tuesday evening video up and running on both websites. We're working hard to get all the Zoom sessions online, but remember, we're juggling our day jobs alongside this passion project, so a little patience can go a long way. Last week, I challenged you to up your game with an extra serving of plant-based goodness in your daily diet. If you're hitting that 3 to 4 servings per day mark, you're already rocking it better than 90% of people in this country. And hey, you're not just adding to your life, you're adding life to your years. For this week, I've got something else special for you, a YouTube video perfectly in tune with tonight's theme. It's a must-watch, and the link will be dropped in the chat for easy access. And as usual, in the next few days, I'll post a summary of tonight's insights and tasks on both websites. So this week, I want you to go up another plant-based serving per day. You can do this. Don't worry about what you can't eat. Focus on what you should eat. Tonight's spotlight is on an extraordinary presenter, Dr. Priya, whom I've had the pleasure of knowing for nearly 3 years. We crossed paths on the Clubhouse app, just like our last week's speaker, Dr. Gupta. Dr. Priya's credentials are impeccable. She is a triple board certified pulmonary medicine doctor, critical care medicine doctor, and lifestyle medicine doctor with rich experiences in lung transplantation, genetics, immunology, and nutrition. She's a Duke University alumna and honed her medical skills at the Medical College of Georgia. She then completed a residency and specialty training at Emory University in Atlanta. She's a captivating speaker, and she's graced numerous presentations in her fields and is featured in some high-profile health videos. Dr. Priya and I share a commitment to making food choices that simultaneously contribute to making our world a safer and healthier place for all beings, and in tackling climate change. She's a seasoned pro in this journey, and you'll see just how much she shines in this arena. Get ready for an enlightening 15 minutes as Dr. Priya delves into the interconnected worlds of exercise and sleep. Is that the order of importance? Well, they are both vitally important, but if we had to pick, sleep might just edge out as the front runner. Consider this: skipping a day of exercise is one thing, but missing out on 24 hours of sleep, that's a whole different ball game. All right, enough spoilers from me. I'll just give a warm welcome as I pass the mic to my esteemed colleague and friend, Dr. Priya.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. It is a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm actually truly honored to come speak with you all about this. Am I audible? Is my speaker working okay for everyone? Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just let me know if you are seeing, I can't tell quite yet which screen it's sharing. Is it sharing my slide view or?
No, it's not the slide view yet.
Okay. Is it doing the preview mode? Is that the one it's sharing? It's just not telling me which one is sharing.
Yes, it looks like it's the preview mode.
Okay, let me stop and try that one more time. Sorry. It somehow switched my screens.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. Great. So as Dr. Thompson mentioned, my name is Dr. Priya. Online, I go by the Veg Doc. I put my picture on my presentation. I don't typically do that, but the reason I've done that is I have a little bit of facial swelling from a bug bite, and so I'm feeling a little self-conscious about being on camera today. So bear with me, please, if you don't mind. I'm really honored to speak about these two particular topics. And frankly, part of the reason I wanted to speak about these two topics is that I myself need inspiration sometimes. And I think that we can, in exploring these topics and reminding ourselves of what our goals are, we can inspire ourselves. I think it is very natural for people to have ebbs and flows in their habits. And so when I do this presentation, I don't want anyone to feel as if, oh God, I'm not there yet. I'm doing a terrible job. That is not the goal of this presentation. As I tell patients, this is information. These are aspirational goals. And every step you take to get towards that goal is just as important as getting to the goal. In fact, I would say it is more important than getting to the goal, because you want the journey to be enjoyable and sustainable. There's no point in coming out the gate racing if you're not going to be able to sustain that pace. It's much better for you to know what the ultimate goal is, but start with incremental steps. And so what I always recommend people do is listen to the talk, and as you're listening, keep an ear out for small changes that you can make that will get you eventually to your goal. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to live better with exercise and sleep. As Dr. Thompson alluded to, our goal really is not about putting more years in our life. It's just as important that we put life in our years. We want a good quality of life. So we'll start with exercise. We'll talk very briefly about exercise. We'll talk about its benefits, how much people should be exercising, how often, and then I want to talk a little bit more about sleep, because I think people have a lot of confusion about sleep. What is good sleep? How much sleep do we need? What are some good things that we can do to help our sleep? And so that's what we'll spend the latter half of the talk about. So you'll see that in my talk, I have all of my citations at the bottom, and then I'll also have them at the end. I'll give them to Dr. James and Chanel as well for you all to have access to later. But I wanted to pick websites, and the reason I specifically picked websites as opposed to studies and literature is because I wanted this to be accessible to people. So all of this is actually aimed at patients, everything that you see here. So let's talk a little bit about exercise. Why should we exercise? So a lot of people will commonly think that one of the most important goals of exercise is weight loss. And don't get me wrong, if you exercise on a regular basis, you may in fact lose weight. But that's not actually the goal of exercise. Were you guys aware that an independent risk factor for premature death is a sedentary lifestyle? It can be just as bad for you as things like smoking, eating processed meats, which we know are carcinogens, right? So exercise is actually, the goal of exercise is actually to maintain your health and to maintain longevity. So what are some of the immediate benefits of exercise? Well, we know that people who exercise regularly have better sleep. We know that you tend to have lower anxiety, lower stress levels. That's not to suggest that if you have a medical diagnosis of depression or anxiety, that you may not also need medications. I'm not suggesting remotely that you just need to exercise your way out of anxiety, but we know that you can lower your stress levels and anxiety through regular exercise. I know that when I am stressed at work, I will often step away and either do a mindfulness exercise, or I will do actual exercise that gets my heart pumping, just so that I can kind of relax and burn off some of those anxiety jitters. We know one of the other immediate effects of exercise is that your blood pressure is lower after exercise. And when you sustain an exercise program, over time, your blood pressure lowers. We also know that your white blood cell count goes up when you exercise on a regular basis. You'll see these little bumps after each exercise session, but over time, you develop a little bit of a more robust immune system. And again, that is not to replace preventative measures like taking your medications or getting vaccines or masking in crowded spaces and things like that. But we do know that if you want to build a resilient body, that exercise is key to that. In the long term, we know that when you compare folks that exercise regularly to folks that don't exercise regularly, the folks that exercise regularly have better brain health, they have better memory, they have better cognition, they have better what we call executive function. We know that heart health is better because you're literally exercising your heart and making it as strong as possible. Did you know that an independent risk factor for many cancers is actually lack of exercise, lack of activity? So again, we know that exercise can help decrease our risk of some of the top killers in the world, let alone in the United States. Again, you absolutely need to have exercise as part of your plan to maintain a healthy weight. When we talk about exercise, and I'll go over some details in the next slide, we know that bone strength is impacted by weightlifting, by resistance training. So we know that exercise actually impacts bone strength. When you add in flexibility training, you improve your balance and coordination. And one of the real tangible benefits of this is as we age, especially as we get older than 60, 65, it helps to keep us living independently. It protects us when we fall. It protects us from hip fractures and things like that, because we are more flexible. We are less likely to become injured. So I've talked a little bit about what exercise, what the benefits of exercise are. I want to backtrack for just a second and distinguish between activity and exercise. Activity is important. Living an active life is critical. Activity can be anything from doing your household chores, cleaning the bathroom, vacuuming, walking around at work. Exercise specifically indicates a brief period of activity that actually gets your heart rate up, gets you breathing a little bit harder, and gets you sweating a little bit. If you are new to exercise and you are just embarking on this, I would suggest first and foremost, check in with a doctor, make sure it's safe for you to embark on exercise. If you have been sedentary for a while and you are now going to embark on exercise, congratulations. Once you get the all clear from your doctor, just check in with yourself. It is normal to feel a little short of breath, especially if you're maybe a little deconditioned from not exercising in the past. But if you are experiencing significant shortness of breath, chest pain, nausea, then I would stop, check in again with your doctor, and just make sure you don't need to get checked out before you continue. So let's talk about what is the recommended amount of exercise for benefits. So there are basically 3 different ways that you can look at this. So we should all either be doing 150 minutes every week of moderate intensity aerobic activity, or if we're doing vigorous activity, 75 minutes a week, or if we're doing a combination, it's somewhere in between 75 and 150 minutes. For moderate intensity, we want to be working out 5 days a week. For vigorous intensity, as long as we get in the 75 minutes, we're good. And then for example, 3, as long as you're getting between 75 and 130 and 150, you're going to be fine. What is the difference between moderate and vigorous? Without getting too far into the weeds here, you can actually Google your based on your heart rate. So it's individual based on your age group. So you take 220 minus your age, and that is your peak heart rate. That is not your goal. Your goal is going to be somewhere between 50% of that peak heart rate and 75% of that peak heart rate, depending on if we're talking about moderate intensity activity or vigorous activity. And while this, for example, says that jogging or running is vigorous intensity aerobic activity, for some people who are very fit, that might actually be moderate intensity activity. For someone who maybe isn't as fit, walking may get your heart rate up initially, and that may count as vigorous activity at the outset. So you really just want to make sure that you're checking in with your body, checking your pulse, and making sure that you're being guided by those guidelines. We cannot forget that aerobic activity is not the only thing that we need to focus on. And I will fully admit that probably one of the things I am the worst at making sure I do is resistance training, muscle strengthening activities. And as we get older, we've all heard that phrase, use it or lose it, right? That is no more true than it is with muscles. If we do not use our muscles, particularly as we get older, you will start to notice weakening. And that weakening manifests in ways that you don't necessarily think about. Are you having knee pain? Are you having hip pain? Is that your actual joint that's weak? Or is it because your muscles are now atrophying, they're weakening, and they're not stabilizing your joints? Do you wake up with back pain? Is that because your back muscles and your abdominal muscles are weaker now from lack of use? So these are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about when we think about muscle strengthening. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be resistance trainings with bands. It can be weights. It can be going to the gym and doing weightlifting. I'm a big fan of finding free ways of doing that online, as long as it can be done safely. So this does not have to be an expensive activity at all. When you do muscle strengthening activities, you want to make sure you're focusing at least 2 or more days per week. So remember, the goal of muscle strengthening is to build muscle. So we do want rest days when we talk about muscle strengthening, because we want that recovery day for our muscles to strengthen. When we do muscle workouts, when we do strength training, it's ideal that we do strength training on one day, then we do a rest day, then we do strength training on the next day, and then we have a rest day. Now, I've talked a lot about aerobic activity and strength training.
I gotta go on her account.
Oh, I think someone made.
Somebody needs to mute.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to make sure that we don't forget about flexibility. So there are different flexibility recommendations from different organizations. I always recommend people do something to maintain flexibility every single day, particularly if you are retired, if you work from home, these kinds of things. If you are sitting at a desk all day long, you will start to notice that your tendons start to contract a little bit, your ligaments start to contract a little bit, you become stiffer, you become less flexible. The danger in that kind of thing is, let's say you're going for a walk, you slip on the curb and you start to fall. If you have tight muscles and tight ligaments and tight joints, you will not be as resilient to catching yourself to prevent that fall. You will not be as resilient if you actually do fall. You are more likely to injure yourself. This is so important as we get older. Flexibility training, making sure that we're steady on our feet are so important to preventing injury as we get older. So the last thing I'll leave you with is, we talked about what the minimum recommendation is: 150 minutes of moderate exercise or 75 minutes a week of vigorous activity exercise. That's just the minimum recommended amount. If you're doing more than that, that's even better. So if you're already hitting that 150, make your goal 175, 200, that kind of thing. I do want to emphasize, if you're not doing anything right now, that's okay. That's why you're here, right? Don't look at these slides and go, oh my gosh, how am I going to do 150 minutes of exercise this week? That is your goal. So start out with 5 minutes a day. Start out with 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening. It does not have to be 30-minute blocks 5 days a week. As long as you get those 150 minutes in, that's all that matters as your eventual goal. If your first week you only managed 30 minutes, but last week you did 0, hey, that's still 30 more minutes of exercise than you had done last week. So one of my favorite sayings in the world is your only competition is the you of yesterday. That is who you're competing against, right? It does not matter what your neighbor's doing. It doesn't matter what your husband or your wife is doing or what your kids are doing. It matters what you were doing before and what you're doing now. So I would encourage anybody who is maybe a little sedentary, who's maybe fallen off some of that dedication to exercise, find 5-minute pockets to do it. If 5 minutes doesn't work for you, find a minute. While you're heating up something in the microwave for 1 minute, do what I do when I'm heating up something in the microwave. I've got a bad knee from running and from tripping and falling on it a lot because I'm kind of a klutz when I run. So I do strength training exercises for that knee for that 1 minute while something's heating up in the microwave. If I'm cooking something on the stove and it's got to sit on the stove for 5 minutes, I'm doing stretching exercises. My dog has gotten used to me doing yoga in my kitchen. So there's always little ways that you can add in some activity. Okay, so that's it for exercise. I'm going to move on to sleep and then we'll have time for questions. So I wanted to talk for just a few minutes about why we sleep, because most people think of sleep as passive. And that's why I think we end up kind of saying things like, oh, you know what? Sleep is for suckers. I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'm busy, busy, busy. I got to do this. I got to do that. But that's actually not true. Sleep is not at all a passive process. Our physical bodies may be resting, but our brain is incredibly active when we are sleeping. It is an active process of rest, restoration, and cleanup. So one of the key things that sleep does is it helps to clean up a toxic product called beta amyloid plaque. The buildup of beta amyloid plaque is implicated in processes like Alzheimer's dementia. Even if you don't develop Alzheimer's dementia, it's implicated in impaired learning and impaired memory. That's why we know that when people sleep well, they have better cognitive function. They are more resilient to developing Alzheimer's. We know that lack of sleep is related to poor executive function. I think we can all kind of in our own lives think about those times in our life, whether it was you had a newborn in the house, you weren't sleeping well for whatever reason, and then the next day you got to go to work and you're just sluggish and you can't think straight, right? That is poor executive function as a direct result of poor quality sleep. But I want to talk for a minute about chronic illnesses because I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about obstructive sleep apnea in a couple slides. When we don't sleep well, it makes it very hard for us to control hypertension, type 2 diabetes, heart disease. It increases our risk of dementia. If you don't sleep well, your body is so ramped up during the day, you have activated your sympathetic nervous system in an effort to stay awake. And that impacts stress hormone release. That impacts your ability to successfully maintain a healthy weight. I think we can all understand that just like people get hangry, right? They get moody when they're hungry. We all, I think, can relate to the idea that when we are tired, we get irritable, we get grumpy. But over the long term, it can also make mood disorders more likely. And if you already have a mood disorder, it can make it much harder to treat that and manage that. As we talked about with exercise, similar to exercise, good sleep is critical to a healthy functioning immune system. It makes you more resilient to illness. It actually has been shown to make you more likely to respond to the vaccines. So, you know, Dr. Thompson is an allergy immunologist, right? So he knows the importance of having a resilient immune system, and exercise and sleep are two major components of making sure that we have a resilient immune system. So what is good sleep and what is bad sleep? So I want to first define what insufficient sleep is. And insufficient sleep is any amount of sleep that is inadequate to support alertness, performance, and health. And this can either be because of not enough time sleeping, as in a decreased quantity, or of your sleep when you look at brain waves. So how much sleep do we actually need? There's not a set answer for this because at different ages in our life, we need different amounts of sleep. And on top of that, we know that there are circadian rhythms that impact us. I think we've all had the experience of being in college or being teenagers or being in a house with teenagers and getting so irritated that that teenager will not wake up on time, right? That's actually normal for them. So how much we need to sleep, I don't want to focus too much on, but in general, between 6 to 8 hours of good quality sleep at minimum is what we need. So what is healthy sleep? Healthy sleep is sleep that is continuous, where you're not waking up frequently. It's making sure you go to bed and wake up at roughly the same time each day. And the critical piece, you wake up feeling refreshed. If you feel like you need that cup of coffee in the morning to think, if you can fall asleep easily during a TV show, if you kind of like to sleep in on weekends, or you need to sleep in on weekends, if you have trouble controlling your appetite, you find it difficult to concentrate, you don't have energy for exercise, playing with your kids, you're not as interested in sex, these are all signs of poor sleep. What are some things that impair sleep? Sleep apnea is one of the number one underdiagnosed problems with sleep. So this is something that we can talk about when we get to the Q&A, but it is essentially a physiologic process that prevents your brain from getting oxygen. So your brain keeps waking you up so that you will breathe properly. Okay. There are easy treatments for it, which is why we have to know if we have it. We can talk about that during the Q&A. Alcohol. Most people don't realize alcohol is actually terrible for sleep. It makes everyone sleepy, but when you actually fall asleep, the quality of your sleep is incredibly poor. Number 3 is one I think we can all relate to. I am terrible about this, I will fully admit. That blue light, those screens that we have in our bed, so terrible for us for quality of sleep. If we eat large meals, if we drink a lot of beverages before going to bed, well, we're going to be up all night from reflux, from having to get up to pee, that kind of thing. All terrible for sleep. So what should we be doing? Regular bedtime. Train yourself to get in bed at the same time every night, okay? If for some reason you don't fall asleep within those first 30 minutes, get out of bed and go do a quiet activity. I like to do mindfulness activities so that I'm not turning on lights, turning on the TV, that kind of thing, because I want my mind to be in a restful state so that I can fall asleep. The idea here is that you want your body to understand that your bed is for 3 things, the 3 S's. It's for sleep, sex, and if you're sick. That's the only 3 activities that should be happening in that bed. You should not have a TV in your bedroom. You should not be on your phone in the bed, okay? You want to make sure that when you are ready to go to bed, that you have a routine that weans you away from those screens at least 30 to 60 minutes before bed. And if you're like me, no caffeine after about noon. The half-life of caffeine is between 12 and 18 hours. So that morning cup of coffee can affect you all day long. And if you're drinking 5 o'clock, coffee or tea, it's going to impair your ability to have good quality sleep. And then, of course, as I said, avoiding alcohol. So I apologize, I went over time there, but I hope that this was informative for you. These are the main the recommendations I have for you for activity and sleep. And that's, if anyone is interested, although no pressure, that's where you can find me on social media. And that is it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Priya. That was an excellent presentation. I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions. Why don't we take a few questions and then I will introduce Watch Dominion. I'll start off with a question. And first of all, the format is usually you can raise your hand if you have a question, or you can just put it in the chat and one of our staff will, or Chanel will pick it off the chat and we will ask Dr. Priya to answer the question. But I have one right off. Dr. Priya, you had mentioned sleep apnea and we would get to some of that discussion afterwards. Should anyone that snores ask their doctor about getting a sleep study?
That's an excellent question. So the reality is that 50% of people who snore actually do not have sleep apnea. So snoring in and of itself is a concern, but it is not a clear indication. So everyone can go look up the Epworth Sleepiness Scale. And if you qualify, if you have a high score, that's one way that you can find out if you need to talk to your doctor about it. But here's the practical advice that I give people. If you find that when you wake up in the morning, you still are sleepy, if you find that you need naps during the day, if you find that if you're sitting in a quiet, dark room for 30, 40 minutes, you could fall asleep easily. If you are having trouble despite eating well and exercising, but you're still struggling with that hypertension, that type 2 diabetes, your sugars are still out of control. These things can be because of undiagnosed sleep apnea. If you find yourself craving sort of what I call cheap carbs in the middle of the day to get that energy spike, that craving can be because of uncontrolled sleep apnea. The beauty of sleep apnea now is that the diagnosis is much easier. You talk to your doctor. If your doctor feels like you have sleep apnea, you don't even have to go to a sleep lab anymore. For most people, they can do a home sleep study, which is a pretty good indication. And from there, you can be prescribed CPAP. You might not need CPAP. You might just need like a little dental appliance. Sleep apnea is essentially when you fall asleep, all of our muscles relax. That is a normal process of sleeping. That's why, for example, people who sleepwalk, that's not normal because we shouldn't have muscle tone when we sleep. The problem with that, though, is if you've got big tonsils, if you've got a jaw that's kind of set back in your face, like a lot of East Asians or South Asians have, if you have maybe a thicker neck because you're carrying a little extra weight, when those muscles get floppy, they kind of collapse in and they don't allow you to get air into your lungs. Well, your brain's not going to be happy about that lack of oxygen. So your brain kind of nudges you to wake you up. So it's like someone is sitting by your bed, poking you every couple minutes. Hey, wake up, wake up. You might not even know you've woken up. But if I were to put EEG electrodes on you, I would see that you would go from asleep to awake. And that is where the damage happens. Over the long run, it can even impact your heart, as you know, Dr. Thompson, because you can develop something called high blood pressure in your lungs from untreated sleep apnea, and then that can cause heart failure. This is why it's so critical to treat sleep apnea if you have it.
Absolutely. Can't emphasize enough, too, that the escalation of risk for Alzheimer's and other dementias, vascular dementias, when you don't have good oxygenation at night. If you have sleep apnea, I've seen between 40–60% increased risk of Alzheimer's, along with the other vascular effects. Yep. We have an obstetrics gynecologist question here. Dr. Gaston would like to get some pointers from you on how, as an obstetrician, he could get good quality sleep. I'm glad you're having to answer that question, Dr. Priya. My daughter, actually, I'm trying to figure out, my daughter is a gynecologist, and anyway, I'll let you answer that.
No, look, it is a great question. I think you can relate to this, Dr. Thompson. Residency, fellowship, and the medical field are just the worst for sleeping, right? We lecture our patients and we counsel them to get good sleep. And then what are we doing? We're on call all night, right? You're running into the hospital at night. So what I would recommend people do, if they are able to do it, is make sure that when they are finding those pockets of sleep, that it is good quality sleep. So again, ensuring that if you have sleep apnea, you treat it. So this is anecdotal. This is my personal experience, but it is something that I've seen other people share. I've not seen good studies on this, but I notice that when I consistently do my mindfulness exercises before I fall asleep, I wake up feeling better the next morning, and I haven't woken up during the night. Whereas if I don't do that, then any little thing seems to affect my quality of sleep. So one of the things I think that would help, because when you're an OB, obviously it's a very high risk field. You're constantly kind of amped up and things like that. And it's an exciting field for sure, but it's not as conducive to kind of relaxing your mind. So one of the things that I would focus on actually is mindfulness for someone that has a very high stress life, because that is going to translate to better sleep over time. When you're on call, I just don't know that there's any hope for someone who's on call running in to deliver babies. In the call room, there are things that you can do. So when I was on call, I would keep a white noise machine with me. so that I wasn't hearing the hospital alarms and all of those kinds of things. That's typically what I did to kind of minimize some of that trauma that occurs when we're on call.
All right. So, Dr. Priya, we actually have a lot of questions mounting up. So, maybe from this point, we can, so we can get to a lot of questions. We can, you give them just the short form, so we
Okay.
can get to a lot of
Okay,
questions.
sounds
So
good.
the next question is, if you don't sleep for 6 to 8 hours, can you make up for it during the day with an hour or two nap? That's an excellent question. I'll add on to that as an extension. If during the week you lose out on sleep, can you make it up on the weekend?
So the answer to that is yes and no. It's good to make up the sleep, but doesn't replace it. It's a little bit like saying, if I didn't eat a salad for lunch, can I have that liquid supplement, and is that going to be the same? It just won't be the same. The problem with naps that go on for an hour or two is you are perpetuating the cycle, because now you've slept during the day and you are not going to sleep at night. So it's a little bit like jet lag. It is better for you to skip that nap and be tired, so that when you get in bed, you actually fall asleep. Naps should really be no more than 20 minutes. Now, if you are somebody who's driving for a long period of time and you need a nap, take a nap. Like do not drive sleepy, right? But if you're talking about just in your regular day-to-day, I would actually discourage napping for longer than 20 to 30 minutes. And the same for weekends. The goal is not, I'm going to catch up on the weekends. The goal should be, I'm going to make sure that my sleep is good the entire week.
Sounds good. That's textbook from what Dr. Matt Walker, just in case anybody wants to really dive into the weeds about sleep. There's a Dr. Matthew Walker. He runs the sleep lab at UC Berkeley. He has a book called Why We Sleep. And he's all over the internet, YouTube. He has some 30 to 60 to almost 2-hour presentations, but he's wonderfully engaging. And Dr. Priya just gave just the answer he gave when a question was posed to him about how you should take naps, or how long naps should be. All right, so we have another question. Can you exercise before bed if you can't go to sleep? Should you exercise before going to bed?
I would say it depends. I would not suggest vigorous exercise just before sleep, because that's going to amp you up. So if you're going to do something like yoga, some stretching, some small exercises that will relax you, I think that is a good idea. But I would hesitate to suggest, hey, go out for a run or something like that, because that will keep you amped up.
That's true. That's exactly what Dr. Walker has mentioned too. You get all, you want to tone it down, dim the lights, be calm, listen to some music maybe. You don't want any things that amp you up just before you're going to bed, not even exercise. What about insomnia? Dr. Lennox asks, what can you do if you just straight out have insomnia?
So insomnia is unfortunately one of the biggest challenges in American culture and American society. It is one of the leading causes of sleep disorder. And the honest truth to that is that you've got to check in with a sleep doctor, because there are many reasons that someone could have insomnia, and a sleep specialist is the person who's going to be able to help guide you with that.
Thank you. The next question is, how do you overcome the inability to sleep at night if you happen to have an emerging business and find yourself unable to sleep? I think it says unable to sleep at night with melatonin.
So obviously I don't have all the details, but it strikes me that this might be stress induced, the stress of running an emerging business. So again, I think if your overall thought is, as I'm going to bed, my goal is to wind down. My goal is to get into a mental space where things are calming down. So that means creating a boundary for yourself. I am not going to answer work calls. I am not going to think about work. And if you do think about work, it's okay. Just redirect. Take that as an opportunity to redirect your mind to something else, and give yourself a sharp cutoff, right? So if you are going to bed at 9:30 or 10 p.m. every night, then say, 7 p.m., no more work talk. That gives me 3 hours to wind it down, to check in with family, to make sure that I am relaxing, do some mindfulness. I cannot emphasize enough how much either mindfulness or meditation helps to calm the mind, not only before bedtime, but it makes you more resilient through the day. And I'm speaking from experience. I have admittedly slacked off from my mindfulness practice, and I'm noticing it at work. I'm noticing that I'm getting stressed out about things that would not normally stress me out. And now that I've started back the last 2 weeks doing my mindfulness, once again, all of those techniques come into play during my work day, and it helps to lower my stress, which means that my sleep is improved at night.
Great, thank you. Constant Perry asked or states 150 minutes of exercise. Is that all cardio? How much time should we do strength exercise per week versus cardio?
A great question. So it's 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity plus 2 or more days of strength training. And the strength training, it really just depends on how you choose to do it. So it's typically going to be 20 to 30 minutes minimum. So say one day is leg day, say the other day is upper body and back day, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Jerry Anderson says, I have a 5-hour sleep cycle. Whenever I go to sleep, after 5 hours, I am up. It's a lifelong issue. I really don't know how to change that. Something else is in the way of me reading the rest of it, but
Oh, I can say it. I do not
Okay.
like to take any medication. Is there anything I should do? So that it's very hard to know what to do specifically in your situation, because you would need honestly a formal sleep evaluation. I mean, I hate to give that answer because it can be frustrating to hear that from somebody. But the reality is, if this has been a lifelong issue, then it's likely going to be a combination of behavioral change. And nobody is suggesting that you would need medication for this. In fact, I want to take this opportunity to warn people, please, please, please do not get in the habit of taking things like Benadryl. That was an old school method that people would do for falling asleep. It's not a good idea. There's indications that long-term use of Benadryl can worsen cognitive impairment. So the ideal here is to work on the behaviors and create a consistent pattern. Figure out what isn't working, but you would again need to go to a sleep professional for that.
thank you. We're approaching, let's see, we're a little bit after 7:45 here. So I'd like to take this time just to invite our second guest of the night or presenter of the night to give us just a couple of minutes presentation. It was kind of a testimonial of his experience. His name is Watch Dominion. And then we'll come back to answer some more questions. We may, if Dr. Priya will spend maybe a little extra 5 or 10 minutes, we may run over a little bit just to make sure we get the questions answered. Is that okay, Dr. Priya?
Oh, absolutely. I was actually going to say, I'm happy to stay and make sure the questions get answered.
Okay, thank you. So, Watch Dominion, if you could unmute, Watch Dominion is someone else yet another person that I befriended on the Clubhouse app a few years ago. We hung out in a lot of the health rooms and vegan rooms and lifestyle rooms, and he's just a wonderful person. He's who works around people, and I'll just let him get started and tell you a little bit about himself. Watch Dominion, can you unmute? Can't tell. There's so many people whether he's with us. If you hear me,
I'm
okay.
asking him to unmute right now. Okay, so maybe Watch stepped away for a moment. Let's do one more question and I'm gonna reach out to Watch. You on mute.
Oh, Dr. Thompson, you're reading on mute.
I'm sorry.
He said he can't unmute. Let me see here.
Okay. Well, I think the next question is, what about Inspire for sleep apnea?
So Inspire is the new implant that you can use, that you can use an app for. So I think it is promising. I hesitate to recommend recommend it as a blanket recommendation because it's a new device. And so I'm not sure it's been on the market enough to truly show that it works. And I want to emphasize that if you have mild sleep apnea, you may not actually require treatment other than maybe a little weight loss, maybe changing your position when you sleep, right? Maybe using a dental device. As far as CPAP goes, I know that everyone has heard horror stories about CPAP, but for the people that it works for, it is a life changer. I am just not a fan if you don't have to have something implanted in you. I'm not against implantations, pacemakers, things like that. These are life-saving. And if you cannot tolerate anything else for your sleep apnea, then I think Inspire is a great potential option. I would just hesitate to make that the first option.
Thank you. And what is the impact of getting your 6 to 8 hours during the day versus night? Now, of course, I know immediately, Dr. Priya, it makes you think, okay, shift workers.
Yep.
And my son-in-law is a shift worker, and I know I feel sorry for him because although he doesn't feel it bothers him, I know it's not good where you do a week where you're like everybody else, you're getting into work at 8, coming home around, 5, 6 p.m. And then you have a week where you're going into work at 11 p.m. and you're getting off. So maybe you could address that.
Yeah, so I that's actually the reason that I stopped doing in-person ICU work, because I won't work nights anymore. And the reason I won't work nights anymore is the studies have shown that you get your best quality of sleep before midnight when you do sleep at night, like when you have a standard sleep cycle. So if you're someone that's like, oh, I sleep from 1 a.m. to 10 a.m., that's actually not as good quality as sleeping from 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. to like 6 a.m., right? We also know that when you sleep during the day, it is harder to get good quality sleep because your circadian rhythm, the thing that drives your sleep wake cycle, is messed up. Now, if you do it long term and you like for the rest of your life are only working nights, that may be less of an issue. The problem is we don't have studies on that because that's not true to life, right? Even people who work nights, they're still active during the day because that's when the world is awake, right? That's when your kids are awake and things like that. I love this question and I hate this question because it is such an emblematic it's emblematic of societal problems where we kind of don't value people's health, but we value commerce, right? We put people to work at night and we kind of do these things to keep the economy running and that kind of thing. And people who have those jobs often they're doing that job because they have no choice. There are those rare people that absolutely function better at night. And for those folks, I think it's not a big deal. And studies have shown that. But in general, it's definitely better to get your sleep at night than in the daytime.
Couldn't agree more. Well, I think we have Watch Dominion online now. He's able
Yes.
to unmute. All right.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Dominion, Dr. James, and thanks everyone for being here. And happy Martyrs Day. Today is Mahatma Gandhi's death anniversary. And Mahatma Gandhi constantly inspires me. His philosophy of nonviolence inspired Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and also Nelson Mandela. And I'm inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote, which says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And my journey towards justice and veganism began with a sad call one day claiming that my mom had passed away from heart disease. It was a rude awakening for me since I had always taken my mom for granted, just like I had taken my health for granted. To commemorate the memory of my mom, I became a healthcare professional and I started educating myself on the role of my diet and my health. Somebody recommended that I watch this documentary Dominion, which had a profound influence on me. It literally changed my life. And the documentary Dominion is available free online at watchdominion.com. Dominion showed me that we are all connected, humans, animals, and nature. And instead of exercising dominion over the animals and exploiting them, we need to be good stewards of the resources which the Mother Nature has provided us. As we all know, we sow as we reap. By eating plant-based, I started showing kindness to the animals who are sentient beings, who feel pain, and who want to live just like you and I. I started treating my body as a temple for my soul. I started practicing the Hippocrates dictum of let food be your medicine. I stopped consuming animal slaughter products, became a vegan, and lo and behold, I dramatically lowered my bad cholesterol, ran multiple marathons, and got off of all the medications I was taking for various ailments. Now, instead of using animal products, I have switched to oat milk. You ought to try it. I use jackfruit, eggplant, mushrooms, tofu, with some herbs and spices to easily replicate the taste and texture of animal slaughter products. As Mahatma Gandhi taught us to be the change, be the model of peace, compassion, and nonviolence. And I know these days, as you turn on the news with so much chaos, war, strife, and inflation, sometimes it feels like we should give up hope. But by eating plant-based 3 times a day, it gives me a chance to put peace on my plate and in my body and have better control over my health and my life. Eating plant-based has helped me model the peace, compassion, and nonviolence that Reverend Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi taught, and helps me put justice into actions. Because we all know that in the end, our actions speak louder than words. So peace and blessings to all of you. May you all work together to put peace and compassion onto your plate, be vegan, and make this world a just, equitable, and kind place. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. James.
Thank you, Watch Dominion. Yeah, that was very impacting. I believe Coretta Scott King gave up meat long before she passed.
Actually, she and Dexter King, who just passed away, were both vegan.
Right. Right. All right. We have several more questions here. Dr. Lennox has a follow-up question. Do you have a mindfulness practice that works for you?
I do. So I try not to kind of endorse things because I think everybody comes to things differently. And I don't ever want someone to think like I don't get paid for any of the things that I suggest or anything like that. I'm a big fan of free. I will tell you that. And so there are some apps online that have free options for meditations. And I started out with guided meditations. As a young woman in college, I did a lot of meditation where I would just set a timer and I would do a meditation on my own. But as I lost that practice, I needed more of the mindfulness component. Meditation is often the idea of emptying your mind, and mindfulness is a little bit of the opposite of that, a little bit of being in the moment and focusing your mind. They both have benefits, but they're both slightly different in how they approach the idea. And so with mindfulness, I actually started recently at Kaiser, where I took some mindfulness classes. If you live near a Kaiser, I would check and see if they have free classes. They used to before the pandemic, so you can do Tai Chi, you can do yoga, you can do mindfulness sessions, things like that at Kaiser's. But the app that I tend to use, and again, I make zero money from recommending this, and you may prefer a different app, but I actually like Insight Timer. And the reason I like Insight Timer is I get very annoyed by how yoga and meditation have been kind of appropriated by white America and sort of bastardized, for lack of a better word. And there are actually some Indian practitioners on the app, the Insight Timer app. And so that's what I tend to do. What I like about it is there are different voices, there are different times. They have topics on stress and sleep and things like that. Some people like the Calm app. So there are different apps that you can use where people are just kind of talking to you through, whether it's a meditation, whether it is a body scan. When I do mindfulness during the day, there's 2 things that I have a tendency to do. So if I'm having a little bit of a stressful day, then I do a breath exercise, which is strictly when you literally just spend 10 minutes doing nothing but focusing on your breath. 10 minutes seems like a lot. So if that doesn't work for you, 2 minutes to start with, 5 minutes to start with. And that is when you literally do nothing but focus on your breathing. You focus on the rise of your chest, the rise of your belly. And if your mind wanders, that's okay. You understand that's part of it. And you just use that as an opportunity to bring yourself back. So that's when I'm kind of a little stressed out. But when I'm really kind of catastrophizing and I just can't quiet my mind, that's actually when I do a body scan, because that requires a little bit more attention. And that is when you literally go from head to toe and you go big toe. You clue in on your big toe. What is your big toe on your left foot feeling? Then you do your next toe. Then you do your next toe, your next toe. Then you do the front of your leg, the bottom of the front of your foot, the bottom of your foot, your heel, the back of your leg, the front of your leg, right? And you go up one side of your body and then down the other side. And just by doing that, by giving your mind one thing to think about, it kind of helps get rid of some of that catastrophizing and that stressing out and things like that. If you literally Google breath scan or breath exercise or body scan, you'll find people who do these online. And so that's what I would suggest to start out with. At night, like I said, I like to do Insight Timer because it shuts off on its own. So it's not like it's going to keep you awake at night.
That's inside timer or insight?
Oh, Insight.
Inside timer.
Let me put it in the chat.
Okay. Okay. I think the next two questions kind of merged with the last one. Chanel asks, are sleep aids safe?
So Chanel, when you say sleep aids, do you mean like sleep medications, like Ambien, things like that? Or do you mean like melatonin?
No, I'm talking about like the ones that you would get from like just over the counter.
I hesitate to recommend them because one of the challenges with supplements in general is it's not a regulated industry. Okay. So we have no idea what's in them. In fact, a recent study came out just this past fall that looked at melatonin supplements. Mm-hmm. And it looked at multiple different brands and multiple different doses. And most of them didn't have the dose that they said, if they had it at all, or they had far more than the dose they said.
He's a busybody.
Ms. Macklin, I think you're unmuted.
Somebody needs to mute. Please mute.
I'll mute her.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just so that everyone can hear me. So the concern that I would have is when you're buying these over-the-counter supplements that are unregulated, you don't actually know what you're getting. So what you might be doing is doing nothing but getting rid of money from your wallet.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Next question. If you take a nap every day for 2 hours, what can you do to stop napping? Thelma would like to know.
So that's where sleep hygiene comes in. That is a great question. So there are a lot of things that you could do. So the first thing to do is if you consistently say take a 2-hour nap during the day, I would ask yourself first, why do you need that 2-hour nap? Because that to me would indicate, are you somebody that has undiagnosed sleep apnea and that's why you're tired during the day? Is it that you have what we call poor sleep hygiene? So are you somebody who is on the phone until midnight looking at that screen or watching TV until 2 a.m.? Are you eating late at night? Are you eating in bed? Are you doing those kinds of things? And then it's going to be about improving your sleep hygiene. If that does not help you to stay awake during the day and you're still needing those 2-hour naps, then you kind of wean yourself back. So if you're taking a 2-hour nap every day, you say this week, I'm only doing 90 minutes and you set an alarm and you jump out of bed at that 90-minute mark, even if you're feeling sleepy, right? The week after that, you go to 60 minutes. The week after that, you go to 30 minutes. And you'll find that as you cut back on your nap time, you're going to be more tired at night. So you're going to increase your sleep time at night. So it's really just a gradual weaning process. But again, I don't know if we've got time for this. Do you want to talk a little bit, Dr. Thompson, about general good sleep hygiene habits?
Why don't you go over some tips? Maybe we can merge the next two easily because and then why don't we do that after you address these next two?
Okay.
They can be together. One of them from Cedric says, are there healthy vegan foods that are counterproductive to sleep? And then the next one by Brian Jackson is, do drinks like hot non-caffeinated teas contribute toward relaxation and support getting to sleep? Well, of course, I think, Dr. Priya, you and I are thinking right away of a particular vegan food that is in the legume family that may be counterproductive to sleep. You've already alluded to that. So maybe you can retread over that and then move into these non-caffeinated teas that sometimes are taken before bedtime.
Yeah, so caffeine is a big issue. And I speak as someone who at one point was known to drink 6 or 7 sodas or 6 or 7 cups of coffee because I was busy. I was a lung transplant doctor. I was driving in at 3 in the morning to take people from the OR to the ICU after their lung transplants and things like that. And then I had a health issue that I had to like completely wean myself off caffeine. I found out that it was quite easy for me to go without caffeine with the same busy lifestyle. You do have to wean off it. And if you are someone who has been taking caffeine for a long time, you will absolutely get headaches. I would take Tylenol for the first week when I get those headaches, and now I'm fine. Now there are days that I don't have any caffeine at all, but if I do have caffeine, it's going to be in the morning, and I have 0 caffeine after noon. And like clockwork. I mean, if I drink a cup of tea at 12:30 that has caffeine in it, I will be up all night now. So what I recommend to people is avoid, and that also includes green tea. Green tea can be a healthy part of a diet, and there are some important benefits to green tea, but green tea has caffeine in it. Even decaf coffee and decaf tea has caffeine in it. So again, while I don't normally recommend specific products, I like sometimes having a cup of coffee at night or having a cup of, I'm Indian, so we make masala chai, at 5 p.m. So I actually drink rooibos chai that has the same spices in it that I would normally drink as a tea, because rooibos is just an herbal tea. There's literally no caffeine in it. There are coffee brands, it's not really a coffee, there are actually herbal teas that taste like coffee. So like I like Teachino. Other people like other brands. And so sometimes if I want that cup of coffee at night, but I want no caffeine, then I will brew myself some Teachino. Or like I said, I'll brew myself, like tonight, I'm gonna have a pumpkin rooibos herbal tea, but I drink it like I would Indian tea, which is with a little bit of plant-based milk. And that's kind of part of my relaxation ritual at night. And then, sorry, what was the other question was?
About the, those herbal teas, the non-caffeinated drinks at night, like herbal teas.
Yeah, so there's not a huge amount of great, strong evidence that those truly do relax you. There is some evidence for things like chamomile, but my thought process is this: if you're somebody who drinks chamomile and you find it soothing, does it really matter if there's evidence for it? There's little harm to drinking it. Just make sure, again, that you're not drinking 3 cups of herbal tea and then going to bed, because what's going to happen to you in 2 hours? You're going to have to get up to pee, right? So if it's part of your relaxation ritual at night, I think it's perfectly fine. And I don't think you need to have evidence for something like that. Just, again, I avoid anything that says decaf, because decaf means they've removed the caffeine from it, but there's still a little bit of caffeine in there. Whereas an herbal, not so much. I will warn people against peppermint teas at night, only because peppermint relaxes the lower esophageal sphincter and it can promote reflux, which is bad for you when you go to sleep. So anything that has mint or peppermint in it, I tend to avoid at night.
Okay, great. Well, we've rounded the bend here. It's almost 10 after the hour. We will look through the rest of the questions in the chat, and we will send them or email them to Dr. Priya, and we will make sure we address those questions. So I I guess we could, Chanel, maybe we'll post them on our website sometime over the weekend or by the weekend. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. It usually takes
Okay.
about a day to, finish the recordings. And we'll make sure that they're there by, today is Tuesday, so at least by no later than Friday morning.
Okay. Wonderful
Okay.
questions, though, everybody. Thank you for hanging in there. And Dr. Priya, excellent presentation. Obviously, it's spurred a lot of interest and questions, and they keep coming. But thank you so much for your presentation. And thank you, Watch Dominion, for your testimonials, very heartfelt. I'm going to hand the mic back over to you, Chanel. I'll just say to everyone, next week we will have Dr. Miller on. She'll tell us about supplements. What supplements should we consider? She'll talk about the SOS foods. Help. The foods that probably you need help if you eat them. The food that's loaded with salt, oil, and sugar. We'll have a riveting discussion and Q&A, I'm sure. But I will hand the mic to you.
Okay. All right. So this was the third week. We have one more good week. You guys go out there and eat plant-based food, get you some rest. I want to hear about some exercise that you've done over this next week and how your sleeping is improving. Like I said, I'm glad to see so many repetitive faces each week. It's exciting because you all are invigorated. I'm invigorated. So go out, come back next week, check out our website. It will be on by Friday. And we hope you have a good rest of the week. Okay? See you all later. We're in this
Thanks so
together.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank you,
Priya.
everybody.
And thank you, Watch Dominion.
Thank you, everybody. It was really good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good job, doctor.
Thank you. So Dr. Miller, you got 1 week to get all the knowledge organized in a 15-minute
I know
presentation.
the content. I will. I'm almost there. I'll probably send it to you in a couple days. I'll actually be presenting from the